The loudspeaker crackled as 200 cadets turned in unison. Emily Harper stood frozen, dismissal papers burning her palm. Farmer's daughter finally flunks out, someone sneered. But in the shadows, an F-22 Raptor glinted, the jet they'd erased from her records. 3 days later, when the Air Force's Golden Boy choked mid-maneuver, only the outcast crop duster's daughter could save him, using the stolen fighter they never thought she'd touch. They called her name over the loudspeaker, loud enough to make every cadet turn. In front of the entire unit, Emily Harper was handed a sealed envelope and told to exit the lineup. No reason, no explanation, just the cold precision of institutional rejection. Someone laughed. Someone else muttered, "Guess the farmer's daughter couldn't keep up." Have you ever been publicly humiliated for something you drop your story in the comments? We know those moments never leave you. Emily's nails dug crescents into her palms as laughter chased her off the tarmac. She didn't cry, not here, not yet. But her father's weapon burned against her chest, whispering, "They'll regret this." While the Academy erased her name, one file was quietly duplicating in the simulator logs. And one aircraft, untouched off books, was already being prepared by the only man who still believed in her. She wasn't done. Not even close. They wanted silence. They were about to hear thunder. Emily Sparrow Harper stood alone on the tarmac, her short-cropped blonde hair ruffling in the breeze as she watched the other cadets perform their drills in the distance. At 28, she was older than most of the recruits, with sharp green eyes that missed nothing and a quiet demeanor that had made her an easy target. The wind carried fragments of laughter from a group of younger cadets, all from military families, all sailing through evaluations with suspiciously consistent scores. Captain Bradley Thornton approached, his chiseled features arranged in an expression of professional regret that didn't reach his icy blue eyes. "We've reviewed your performance matrix," he stated, voice clinically detached. "It doesn't meet criteria for tactical decisions under high-stress response." His tone was reasonable, his words following protocol perfectly, yet the satisfaction lurking beneath his perfect composure was unmistakable to Emily. The sun was setting now, casting an orange glow across the hangars and runways. Emily touched the tarnished silver wingpin fastened to the inside of her jacket. Her father's pin, the only thing she had left of him after the crash that took his life 3 years ago. She ran her thumb over the worn edges, feeling the slight indentation where his name had once been etched before years of handling had smoothed it away. John Coleman Harper hadn't been just any crop duster. He'd been a legend in their small community, known for his precision flying and mechanical genius. Local pilots would divert miles out of their way to have him check their engines, trusting his instincts more than manufacturer manuals. "You've got the touch, Sparrow," he told her the first time she'd taken the controls of his old biplane at the age of 12. "It's in your blood." The memory both comforted and stung. She'd promised him she would fly someday. Really fly, not just dust fields. Now that promise lay shattered at her feet, another casualty of a system that valued pedigree over skill. Emily was so lost in thought that she didn't notice the approach of Tech Sergeant Danny Brooks until his gravelly voice broke through her reverie. "Rough day, kid." The 40-year-old mechanic had grease smudged across his forearm and compassion in his eyes. His weathered hands bore the marks of decades working with aircraft, scarred knuckles, oil embedded in the creases of his skin, fingernails permanently darkened from hydraulic fluid. Unlike most at the academy, Danny had never treated her with disdain. She'd often found refuge in the maintenance hangar, her mechanical aptitude earning her a modicum of respect from the veteran technician. "Just got my walking papers," Emily replied, keeping her voice steady with practiced control. "Apparently, my tactical response profile doesn't meet standards." The bitter words tasted like ash in her mouth, but she refused to let her disappointment show. Danny's weathered face hardened. "Thornton's work, I'm guessing. The same way your Euro stabilizer mysteriously recalibrated mid-simulation yesterday." The unexpected insight caught Emily off guard. For weeks, she'd performed flawlessly in simulations and maintenance tests only to face inexplicable equipment issues during critical evaluations. There had always been some documented reason. Calibration drift, software patches, sensor anomalies, all perfectly timed to undermine her performance. Doesn't matter now, she said, turning to walk toward the base exit. I've got 48 hours to clear out. Danny stepped into her path, his expression suddenly intense. Hold up. You're just going to walk away? Let Thornton win. Emily's jaw tightened. I fought every day I was here, Sergeant. They've made their decision. Danny glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard, then leaned closer. What if I told you Thornton's about to fly your father's jet in front of the Pentagon, and I've got the codes to put you in the cockpit? There was something in his tone that made Emily pause, a conspiratorial edge that kindled a dangerous spark of hope. I'm listening, she said cautiously. Danny nodded toward the maintenance hangar. Walk with me. As they moved across the tarmac, the older man spoke in low, urgent tones. 3 days from now, there's going to be a demonstration for some big brass from Washington, a showcase of the program's best pilots. Thornton's the star attraction, of course, showing off in the new F-22 they just brought in for testing. Emily's eyes widened. The Raptor was the Air Force's premier fighter, a technological marvel that few pilots ever got to handle. What's that got to do with me? Emily asked, though a wild idea was already forming in her mind. Danny's eyes glinted with mischief and determination. I've been watching you, Harper. You've got skills these silver spoon fly boys couldn't touch with a decade of training. It's in your instincts, the way you handle every machine you touch. He paused at the hangar entrance, turning to face her fully. Your father and I served together for 8 years before the incident that grounded him. I was there when they falsified the systems report, called it pilot error when the real cause was Thornton's manipulated flight data. Emily felt a jolt as Danny's gaze flicked momentarily to the barely visible edge of her father's pin. You've got 3 days, he continued. 3 days to prove what you can do, and I know how you can do it, but it's risky, career-ending for me, possibly worse for you. The simulator hummed to life under Emily's touch, its controls familiar yet thrillingly different from anything she'd officially trained on at the academy. Danny stood watch at the hangar door as she settled into the pilot seat, her heart racing with equal parts fear and exhilaration. The soft blue glow of the instrument panels illuminated her face, casting shadows that accentuated her determined expression. Her fingers moved across the startup sequence with practiced precision, each switch and dial responding to her touch as if welcoming her home. You've got 2 hours, he told her. Make them count. As the screens illuminated around her, Emily closed her eyes for just a moment, allowing herself to be transported back to a different time to golden wheat fields stretching to the horizon and the rickety old biplane that had been her first classroom. Her father's voice seemed to whisper in her ear, "Feel the aircraft sparrow. Don't just fly it, become it." The memories flooded back with startling clarity. John Harper had been more than just Emily's father. He'd been her mentor, champion, and first glimpse into a world beyond their small farm. A former military pilot himself before an injury had grounded him permanently. He'd turned to crop dusting to stay in the sky. On her 12th birthday, instead of the doll or bicycle other girls might have received, John had led his daughter to the small airstrip behind their property and hoisted her into the cockpit of his weathered yellow biplane. She remembered the smell of aviation fuel mingling with the earthy scent of freshly turned soil. The leather seat cracked and worn smooth from years of use, the control stick fitting her small hand as if it had been made for her. Time you learned the family business, he'd said with a wink. What had started as simple lessons evolved into something more profound. By 16, Emily could not only fly, she could diagnose engine problems by sound alone, and had saved 3 local pilots when their aircraft developed mid-flight issues. The first had been old Mr. Grayson, whose Continental engine had developed a dangerous misfire during seeding season. Emily, hearing the irregular rhythm from the ground, had radioed immediate landing instructions and identified the fault before his wheels had even touched down. The second was a crop duster from the neighboring county who'd called in a panic when his controls stopped responding properly at altitude. Emily had talked him through an emergency procedure her father had taught her, saving both pilot and aircraft. The third had been more dramatic, a wealthy businessman whose fancy Cessna had encountered fuel system problems. By the time Emily finished her makeshift repairs using parts from a tractor and baling wire, the man had offered to fund her education. She turned him down. Harper pride ran as deep as Harper talent. What her academy instructors would never know was that Emily had won the Regional Agricultural Aviation Simulation Challenge 2 years running, a competition among farm pilots testing navigation in extreme weather conditions. She still remembered the shock on the judges' faces when she'd emerged from the simulator with a record-setting score. A 23-year-old woman outperforming veterans with decades of experience. It's not official training, a base instructor had dismissed when she'd mentioned it during her application interview. The achievement brushed aside with a condescending smile. But those skills, intuitive understanding of airflow, adapting to sudden changes, protecting an aircraft's systems under stress, were precisely what made her exceptional. The Academy's standardized protocols couldn't measure the kind of pilot she already was. Now, as the simulator came fully online, Emily opened her eyes with renewed determination. The virtual cockpit of the F-22 was infinitely more complex than her father's simple biplane, but the principles remained same. She ran her fingers over the controls, familiarizing herself with their placement and function. The throttle was heavier, the response curved steeper, but underneath all the sophisticated technology beat the same heart. An aircraft waiting to dance with the right partner. Danny had stolen the access codes from the instructor's database, a serious offense that could end his 20-year career. But he'd done it without hesitation after witnessing Emily's treatment at the academy. Some things matter more than rules, he told her gruffly, like justice. Your father would have done the same for me. The simulator program Danny had selected was no beginner's course. It was the Advanced Combat Training module reserved for final stage cadets. If Emily could master this, she could fly anything. For the next 2 hours, Emily lost herself in the virtual sky. The first few attempts were rough. The F-22's responsiveness catching her off guard after months of training on less sophisticated aircraft. 3 times she crashed during high-speed maneuvers. The simulator flashing red with failure notifications. The simulator screen flashed red, combat failure. Target lost. Emily glared at the alert. My father landed a biplane on fire. Try harder. But with each simulation, virtual mission, her hands grew more confident on the controls. Her instincts honed through years of unauthorized flying over Kansas farmland began to assert themselves. The fourth attempt showed marked improvement. By the sixth, she was outperforming the programmed benchmarks. What the academy instructors had dismissed as unorthodox technique was in reality the mark of a natural pilot who understood flight on an intuitive level. When the simulated F-22 experienced a catastrophic hydraulic failure at Mach 1, Emily instinctively executed a sequence of adjustments that not only stabilized the aircraft, but maintained mission parameters. By the time Danny returned to warn her that security would be making rounds soon, Emily had completed 3 combat scenarios with scores that would have placed her at the top of any class. I told you, Danny said with quiet satisfaction as she reluctantly powered down the simulator. The security logs would show only routine maintenance checks thanks to his careful preparation. You've got the touch, just like your father. John could feel an aircraft's limits better than anyone I ever knew. Before Thornton made sure he'd never fly military again. Emily's hand went instinctively to the tarnished pin hidden inside her jacket. Why didn't you tell me you knew him so well? Danny's expression grew somber. Watching your old friend's reputation get destroyed does something to a man. I tried fight it back then and got nowhere. The system closed ranks around Thornton, the golden boy with the right connections, but seeing you fly now, it's like history giving us a second chance. Their conversation was cut short by the sound of footsteps approaching the hangar. We've got to move, he whispered urgently, guiding her toward a side exit. Security. As they slipped out into the night, Emily realized they'd left the simulator running. A security camera mounted in the corner of hangar blinked silently, its red light a silent witness to her unauthorized session. The camera's red light pulsed like a heartbeat. Somewhere, a monitor lit up and a shadowed figure leaned closer, smirking at the footage of Emily in the stolen simulator. Danny noticed it too late. Damn it, he muttered. Someone's going to see that footage. Emily felt a chill of dread. What happens now, she asked, knowing that whatever slim chance she had of proving herself had likely just evaporated. But Danny's expression was calculating rather than defeated. Now we accelerate the plan. You've got 72 hours to prove what you can do, and someone just saw you do it. Question is, who? And what will they do about it? The morning after her simulator session, Emily awoke to an urgent knock on her dormitory door. Throwing on a t-shirt and sweatpants, she opened it to find Lieutenant Mia Alvarez standing in the hallway, her dark eyes unreadable. At 30, Alvarez was one of the few female instructors at the academy and known for her tough but fair approach. She was also, Emily noted with a sinking feeling, the head of security operations. Harper, Alvarez said crisply. Get dressed and meet me at Hangar 6 in 15 minutes. Don't talk to anyone on your way there. Before Emily could respond, the lieutenant turned and strode away, leaving her standing barefoot and confused in the doorway. So, this was it. They discovered the unauthorized simulator use, and now she was about to face the consequences. Emily dressed quickly, her mind racing through possible scenarios, none of them good. Best case, she'd simply be escorted off the base immediately rather than having the 48 hours she'd been granted to pack her things. Worst case, there would be legal repercussions, possibly affecting Danny as well. The thought of the grizzled mechanic facing disciplinary action because of her made Emily's stomach twist with guilt as she made her way across the grounds toward Hangar 6. A smaller facility used primarily for equipment storage. She kept her eyes forward, avoiding the curious glances of passing cadets. Word of her dismissal had spread quickly, and she had no desire to fuel the gossip mill further. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of jet fuel and distant rumble of aircraft taking off for early training exercises. Sounds and smells that Emily had grown to love during her brief time at the academy. Lieutenant Alvarez was waiting inside the hangar, standing beside a tarp-covered piece of equipment that Emily immediately recognized as the simulator from the night before. Her heart sank. There was no denying her actions now. Close the door, Alvarez instructed, her tone giving away nothing. Emily complied, then stood at attention, bracing herself for what was to come. To her surprise, instead of beginning a reprimand, Alvarez walked to a control panel on the wall and pressed several buttons. Security cameras in the corners of the hangar powered down with soft beeps. We have exactly 7 minutes before the system automatically reactivates, the lieutenant said, turning back to face Emily. That should be enough time for you to explain why you were using a restricted simulator after hours and why your performance metrics broke 3 academy records. Emily blinked, momentarily stunned. This wasn't the conversation she'd expected. You saw the footage? Alvarez nodded, a hint of impatience crossing her features. I monitor all security alerts personally. Imagine my surprise when I saw a supposedly subpar cadet, one who'd just been dismissed from the program handling complex combat scenarios with more skill than most of our graduating class. So, I'll ask again. Explain. Emily hesitated, weighing her options. Lying would be pointless. The evidence was literally right beside them. But the truth implicated Danny, whose career was on the line, as if reading her thoughts. Alvarez added, "And before you try to protect Brooks, don't bother. I know he helped you access the system. What I want to know is why." Taking a deep breath, Emily made her decision. "Because Captain Thornton's assessment of my abilities was wrong," she said, meeting Alvarez's gaze directly. "I've been flying since I was 12 years old. My father was John Harper, a military pilot, before he was injured. He taught me everything he knew." Emily's voice grew stronger as she continued, fueled by months of suppressed frustration. "But from day one, something always went wrong during my evaluations. Equipment malfunctions, calibration issues, all conveniently timed and never thoroughly investigated. I used the simulator because I wanted proof for myself, if no one else, that I deserved to be here." The words rushed out now, unstoppable. "Sergeant Brooks just gave me the chance to show what I can really do without interference." Alvarez's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or understanding. The lieutenant had faced her own battles in the male-dominated world of military aviation. Rumors of her clashes with the old guard were well known among the cadets. "That's a serious accusation, Harper," she said after a moment. "Manipulating evaluation systems is grounds for court-martial." Emily squared her shoulders. "I know what I'm saying, and I know the risks." Alvarez studied her for a long moment, then glanced at her watch. 3 minutes left. "So, what exactly was your plan? Break into the simulator? Prove you can fly? Then what? The dismissal order is already filed." "I don't know," Emily admitted, the brief surge of defiance fading. "It was stupid and impulsive. I just couldn't walk away without trying." To her surprise, Alvarez's stern expression softened fractionally. "No, it wasn't stupid. Reckless, maybe, but not stupid." The lieutenant moved to the simulator and pulled back the tarp completely, revealing the sophisticated equipment beneath. "You know what this is scheduled for, right? The demonstration for the Pentagon officials this Friday. Thornton's big moment in the spotlight." Emily nodded. Danny had mentioned the showcase. "What if?" Alvarez said slowly. "Instead of leaving the base quietly, you showed the brass exactly what kind of talent Thornton is pushing out the door." As the security cameras hummed back to life, Alvarez stepped back, her professional demeanor firmly back in place. "You're restricted to base until your discharge is finalized. Harper," she said loudly for the benefit of any monitoring systems. "I'll expect you to comply with all protocols during your remaining time here." With that, the lieutenant strode to the door, pausing only briefly to add, "Thornton altered your scores. Meet me at Hangar 6. And then she was gone, leaving Emily standing alone in the hangar, her mind reeling with possibilities that had seemed impossible just minutes before. That night, as Emily slipped into the simulator using Walsh's credentials, she was startled by movement in the shadows. Cadet Ethan Walsh himself stepped forward, his handsome face unreadable. "Figured I'd find you here," he said quietly. Emily tensed, ready to defend herself, but Walsh made no move to sound an alarm. "Thornton assigned me to watch you," he admitted, surprising her with his candor. "Said you might try something before leaving. Told me to record anything suspicious." He held up a small device, a voice recorder, then deliberately switched it off. Emily regarded him warily. "Why are you telling me this?" Walsh hesitated, then gestured to the simulator. "Last week, I watched you diagnose and fix a lateral stability issue in the Mark V simulator that 3 instructors couldn't solve. Then, your evaluations suddenly showed you failing to comprehend basic stability principles." He shook his head, genuine confusion in his eyes. "It doesn't add up." Moving closer, he observed the screen displaying Emily's last simulation scores. "I've been trying to nail that inverted descent for weeks," he said, nodding toward the completed scenario statistics. "Thornton says it's essential for the demonstration on Friday, but I can't seem to get the timing right." For the next hour, they worked together, Emily guiding Walsh through the maneuver. As they trained, Walsh revealed more. Thornton's been altering your evaluation scores. I've seen him do it. And then the bombshell. The F-22 for Friday's demonstration. It's her father's jet, marked with his forgotten call sign painted on the side. Emily froze, recognizing her father's call sign. Walsh explained that Thornton had specifically requested that aircraft, mentioning poetic justice and closing a circle. Thornton's smile didn't reach his eyes as he dismissed her. But when Emily turned, she caught him fingering a wing pin identical to hers, the one he'd stripped from her father's file years ago. As they finished the session, Walsh's expression had changed from skepticism to quiet respect. I don't know what they see when look at you, he said, shutting down the simulator. But I see someone who flies like she belongs. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of clandestine meetings and late-night simulator sessions. Emily, Alvarez, Danny, and Walsh formed an unlikely alliance, each bringing unique skills and knowledge to their hastily constructed plan. During the day, Emily maintained the pretense of preparing to leave the base, packing her meager belongings and completing discharge paperwork with a resignation that fooled all but the most observant eyes. But at night, she transformed into the pilot she was born to be, spending hours in the simulator with Walsh's access code, mastering the F-22's complex systems and pushing its virtual capabilities to their limits. You're a natural, Danny observed during one such session. His gruff voice softened with something like paternal pride. Just like your old man. Lieutenant Alvarez proved to be a formidable strategist, using her position as head of security to monitor Thornton's movements and communications without raising suspicion. It was Alvarez who discovered that the captain had scheduled a private inspection of the FX-97, the Coleman, night before the demonstration. He's going to do a final check of all systems, she reported during their meeting in a rarely used storage facility. Standard procedure, but it gives him ample opportunity to make any adjustments he might want to ensure the aircraft performs to his specifications. The implication hung heavy in the air. If Thornton had been willing to manipulate evaluation systems to keep Emily out of the program, what might he do to guarantee his own success during the highest profile flight of his career? You think he'd tamper with the aircraft? Walsh asked, his voice hushed despite the privacy of their location. He had been the most reluctant member of their conspiracy at first, years of conditioned loyalty to Thornton, warring with his newfound conscience. But with each revelation of the captain's ethical compromises, Walsh's resolve had strengthened. Not directly, Danny replied, his eyes hard with accumulated knowledge of military politics. Thornton's too smart for that, but he might make subtle optimizations, tweaks to the responsiveness, adjustments to the control surfaces, nothing that would register as sabotage, but enough to give him an edge during the demonstration. Emily frowned, considering the implications. Could those same optimizations be used against him? She asked, an idea beginning to form. Danny's slow smile was answer enough. The plan they ultimately devised was audacious, requiring split-second timing and flawless execution. Alvarez would ensure Emily's continued access to the base despite her official dismissal, while Walsh would serve as their eyes and ears within Thornton's inner circle. Danny's role was perhaps the most crucial and the most dangerous. As chief maintenance technician, he would be present during Thornton's inspection of the aircraft. I can't stop him from making his adjustments, Danny explained. But I can document them, and more importantly, I can ensure they're not as effective as he thinks they'll be. The risk was enormous. If caught, Danny faced not just dismissal, but potential criminal charges. Yet, the old mechanic seemed almost cheerful about the prospect. Some things are worth the risk, he said when Emily expressed concern. Your father would have done the same for me. Getting Emily from the barracks to the aircraft would require navigating multiple security checkpoints. This will get you past level 2, Alvarez said, handing Emily a forged security badge. After that, you're on your own. Walsh provided a maintenance schedule showing a gap in hangar surveillance between 1345 and 1405, their window of opportunity. There's just one problem, he warned. You'll have to cross the main terminal corridor at peak changeover. If anyone recognizes you, the implications were clear. Emily would be on her own, deep in restricted territory with no plausible explanation for her presence. The night before the demonstration, their plan was set in motion. Walsh reported that Thornton was more agitated than usual, snapping at cadets and obsessively reviewing the flight patterns for the 100th time. He's nervous, Walsh observed with some surprise. I've never seen him like this before. Emily understood the pressure all too well. The Pentagon officials attending the demonstration weren't just evaluating the aircraft. They were assessing the future leadership of Air Force's elite training programs. For Thornton, the stakes couldn't be higher, which made him both predictable and dangerous. As darkness fell over the base, Emily made her way to a predetermined observation point near the maintenance hangar, where she could watch Thornton's inspection without being seen. What she witnessed over the next 2 hours confirmed their suspicions. Thornton moved methodically around the aircraft, occasionally conferring with Danny or consulting a tablet he carried. At several points, directed the mechanic to make subtle adjustments to various components. Nothing dramatic, but enough to customize the aircraft's performance to his specific preferences. Midway through the inspection, Danny clutched his side suddenly, face contorting in apparent pain. Old injury, he gasped to Thornton. Need a minute. The distraction gave Danny crucial moments alone with the aircraft's diagnostic system, enough time to document the changes and implement subtle countermeasures. When Thornton finally departed, looking satisfied with his preparations, Emily remained hidden until Danny emerged from the hangar alone. The mechanic didn't approach her hiding spot directly. Instead, he made a show of locking up the facility and heading toward his quarters. Only when he passed near Emily's position did he drop a small object that glinted in the moonlight, a data drive containing the documentation of Thornton's optimization. What Emily couldn't know was that at very moment, Thornton was reviewing security footage in his office, a glass of expensive whiskey in his hand, and a troubled expression on his face. Despite their precautions, something had triggered his suspicion. Perhaps a pattern in Walsh's movements or an inconsistency in the base's security logs. The captain rewound the footage, studying it with narrowed eyes, searching for confirmation of the unease that had been growing in him for days. When he finally found what was looking for, a brief glimpse of Emily entering a restricted area during hours when she should have been confined to her quarters. His handsome face hardened into a mask of cold fury. Not this time, Harper, he murmured, reaching for his phone. Not on my watch. The day of the demonstration dawned clear and bright. Perfect flying weather. Emily awoke before sunrise, mentally reviewing their plan one final time. The window of opportunity would be narrow. Barely 3 minutes to move from maintenance access to the runway without being detected. Their conspiracy hinged on precise timing and the assumption that Thornton, confident in his position, wouldn't anticipate their move until too late. Thanks to Danny's documentation, they knew exactly what optimizations the captain had made to the FX-97. Subtle adjustments to the throttle response and control surfaces for an edge during complex maneuvers. What Thornton didn't know was that Danny had implemented countermeasures, restoring the aircraft's factory settings in ways undetectable during pre-flight check. At noon, Emily met with her co-conspirators in their unofficial headquarters. Danny looked exhausted, but determined. Dark circles ringed his eyes from a night spent meticulously calibrating sensors to mask his modifications to the aircraft. The Coleman is ready, he reported, using her father's call sign with reverence. Thornton completed his pre-flight check an hour ago. Everything's exactly as it should be, which means nothing is as he expects it to be. Lieutenant Alvarez frowned, checking her watch. There's a problem. Security rotation changed. I'm assigned to the VIP section. I won't be able to clear your path as planned. She handed Emily a security badge with her photo, but a different name. This will get you past level 2. After that, you're on your own. Danny pulled Emily aside, pressing something small and metallic into her palm. "Your father would want you to have this today," he said gruffly. Emily opened her hand to find a set of pilot's wings. Not the tarnished pin she'd carried for years, but a gleaming official set inscribed with John Coleman Harper's name and service number. "He earned these," Danny explained, emotion thick in his voice, "kept them even after everything. Found them in his personal effects after the crush." Emily closed her fingers around the wings, too moved to speak. This was more than a keepsake. It was tangible connection to her father's legitimate service, a reminder of what had been taken from him and what she was fighting to reclaim. At 1,400 hours, Thornton and his team took to the sky. Emily watched as the sleek F-22s roared down runway and climbed into the perfect blue expanse. Even from a distance, she could identify the Coleman by its distinctive markings, her father's aircraft flown by the man who had destroyed his career. For 15 minutes, she observed as Thornton led his team through impressive maneuvers, showcasing the Raptor's capability. It was, she had to admit, a masterful display. Whatever else Thornton might be, he was undeniably skilled. But skill without integrity was like an aircraft without a soul. Technically proficient, but lacking the human element that transformed mere flying into something transcendent. At 1,440 hours, Emily's comm unit crackled with Walsh's voice. "He's setting up for the inverted descent now. Stand by." Emily's heart pounded as she watched Thornton's aircraft, her father's aircraft, climbing to the altitude required for the maneuver. This was a moment everything hinged on. The window that would either open or close forever in the next 60 seconds. Now, Walsh's voice came again. "Maintenance alert triggered. You have approximately 2 minutes." Emily moved swiftly through the maintenance corridor, only to freeze as a security officer rounded the corner. His hand instinctively moved toward his sidearm, eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Ma'am, this area is restricted during demonstrations," he called. Without missing a beat, Emily knelt by an exposed junction box. "Signal calibration check," she replied, gesturing to the wires. "Tower's getting interference from the east sector." She pulled a multimeter from her pocket, a detail Danny had insisted on for authenticity. The technical jargon and her confident tone worked. The officer nodded and continued his patrol. Heart hammering, Emily resumed her path to the runway, where the standby Raptor waited. As she approached the cockpit, Emily felt a moment of pure clarity, a certainty that transcended fear or doubt. This was what she had been born to do. Her hands moved over the controls with confident precision, bringing the sophisticated jet to life. "Tower, this is FX-93 requesting emergency takeoff clearance," Emily transmitted. A confused voice responded. "FX-93, there's no scheduled emergency takeoff. Please identify pilot and authorization code." "Tower, this is Emily Harper, callsign Sparrow. Authorization code Coleman 739er. Security protocol override." Static crackled across the radio, followed by a suspicious voice. "FX-93, stand by for verification." Emily's stomach dropped. This wasn't part of the plan. The override should have worked automatically just as she prepared to abort a burst of electronic interference hit the tower's communication system. Danny's final contribution. When the system reset, only the automated protocols remained active. "FX-93, you are cleared for emergency takeoff on runway 3, came the computerized response. Emily engaged the throttle, feeling the immense power of the Raptor surge through airframe. The force pressed her back into the seat as aircraft lifted off, climbing rapidly into the sky that had called to her since childhood. Far above, Thornton was just completing the inverted descent that formed the centerpiece of his demonstration. Through her radio, Emily could hear the appreciative murmurs of the control tower as they monitored his flawless execution. What they couldn't see, what only Danny knew for certain, was that the Coleman was responding differently than Thornton had expected. The subtle changes Danny had made were forcing the captain to compensate continuously, taxing his skills to maintain the appearance of effortless control. It was at this precise moment, as Thornton leveled out from the maneuver, that Emily's aircraft appeared on his radar. "Tower, I'm picking up an unscheduled aircraft in the demonstration airspace," came his sharp voice over the comm. "Please confirm and advise." The confusion that followed was exactly what they had counted on. As controllers scrambled to identify the intruder and Thornton's team responded to the unexpected development, Emily seized her moment. With fluid grace, she maneuvered her Raptor into the formation, positioning herself directly alongside the Coleman. Through the canopies of their respective aircraft, separated by mere meters of empty space, Emily and Thornton locked eyes for a brief electric moment. She saw the instant recognition dawn in his face, followed by disbelief and then fury. His lips moved in what she imagined was a curse, but the roar of the engines swallowed the sound. In response, Emily simply tapped her father's wings, now proudly displayed on her flight suit, and gave Thornton a small, knowing smile. What happened next unfolded with the inevitability of destiny. Thornton, enraged by Emily's intrusion and destabilized by the unexpected response of his aircraft, attempted an aggressive maneuver to reassert control of the situation. But the Coleman, restored to factory settings by Danny's careful work, didn't respond as Thornton anticipated. The slight overcorrection sent the F-22 into the beginning of a spin. Not catastrophic, but definitely not part of the planned demonstration. Emily felt the gravitational forces pulling at her own body as she watched the Coleman begin its uncontrolled rotation. Knew the disorientation Thornton must be experiencing as the horizon spun sickeningly around him. For a moment, she hesitated. The man had systematically destroyed her career, had been responsible for her father's downfall. Justice demanded she let him fail spectacularly before the Pentagon officials and his own superiors. But something deeper than vengeance guided Emily's hands as she keyed her radio. "Coleman, reduce throttle to 40% and ease your stick 2 degrees port," she transmitted calmly, using the precise adjustment needed to counter the spin. "You're fighting factory settings, not your modifications." There was a moment of stunned silence. Thornton struggling with both his aircraft and pride before she saw the Coleman begin to stabilize. "Even now, I won't let your ego kill you," she murmured to herself before breaking formation and executing a perfect roll that positioned her aircraft above Thornton's, clearly visible to the observers below. Then, with the precision her father had instilled in her from first flight, she demonstrated the correct recovery technique. Her Raptor moving with fluid grace through the exact sequence of adjustments that Thornton had been struggling to implement. Sweat beaded on Emily's forehead as she pulled through a high G turn, the pressure forcing blood from her head and darkening the edges of her vision. The physical sensations, the vibration of the airframe, resistance of the control stick, roar of the engines were infinitely more vivid than any simulation. This was real flying with real consequences, and the exhilaration of it surged through her veins like pure electricity. "Tower, this is FX-93, Emily transmitted, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "Captain Thornton appears to be experiencing control issues with the Coleman, requesting permission to complete the demonstration sequence while he recovers." There was a long pause, long enough for Emily to wonder if she had miscalculated, if her gamble would end with military police waiting when she landed. Then, to her astonishment, a new voice came over the comm, deep, authoritative, and undeniably amused. "This is General Michaels, Pentagon Oversight Committee. Permission granted, FX-93. Let's see what you can do." Emily felt a surge of elation as she acknowledged the transmission. This was it. Her one chance to show the world and herself exactly what John Harper's daughter was capable of. For the next 10 minutes, Emily put the Raptor through maneuvers that combined textbook precision with the intuitive flair she developed over years of unauthorized flying. Below, the assembled dignitaries and base personnel watched in amazement as an unscheduled pilot outperformed the Academy's star instructor with apparent ease. Emily's console lit with Thornton's private frequency. "You'll crash and burn like your old man," he spat. She smiled. "Funny, he taught me how to fly through fire." Through it all, Emily maintained a perfect awareness of Thornton's position, noting with grim satisfaction that he had managed to stabilize the Coleman, but made no attempt to interfere with her impromptu display. As she completed the final sequence, a technically challenging combination that she executed flawlessly, Emily keyed her radio once more. "This is Emily Harper, call sign Sparrow, requesting landing clearance. And if it pleases the tower, I'd like to dedicate this flight my father, John Coleman Harper, the finest pilot I've ever known." The request was met with a moment of stunned silence, followed by General Michael's voice again. "Landing clearance granted, Sparrow, and the tower acknowledges your dedication." As Emily guided her aircraft back toward the runway, she felt a weight lifting. Years of suppressed grief and frustrated ambition releasing their hold on her heart. Whatever happened next, court-martial, disgrace, or vindication, she had honored her father in the sky they both loved. The Raptor responded to her touch like an extension of her own body, descending with graceful precision toward the waiting ground. What Emily couldn't know, was that Danny Brooks had one final card to play. Evidence that would transform her act of defiance into something far more significant than personal redemption. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of testimony and evidence. In the base's briefing room, General Michaels and senior officers reviewed Danny's footage showing Thornton making unauthorized adjustments to the Coleman. Adjustments that would have given him an advantage while potentially compromising safety. When confronted, Thornton's arrogance finally cracked. The modifications were minor, he insisted. Standard practice for experienced pilots. The excuse fell flat as Walsh contradicted him, detailing how Thornton had systematically falsified Emily's evaluations. "He told me it was necessary to maintain standards," Walsh admitted, unable to meet Emily's eyes. Said that letting someone like Harper succeed would undermine the program's prestige. Lieutenant Alvarez corroborated this with her own investigation. "There appears to be a pattern, sir," Alvarez reported, placing a data tablet before the general. "Over the past 5 years, 28 candidates without family connections have seen their scores manipulated. Emily Harper isn't an isolated case. She's just the first one who fought back effectively." Danny's final revelation truly shattered Thornton's remaining dignity. The incident that ended John Harper's flying career. The accident attributed to pilot error. Captain Thornton was the test engineer who signed off on the aircraft's systems before that flight. Danny produced a faded incident report. The official record shows a control system failure that Harper supposedly should have anticipated. What it doesn't show is that Thornton had modified those same systems. Modifications virtually identical to what he did the Coleman yesterday. "Is this true, Captain?" General Michaels demanded quietly. Thornton's silence was answer enough. The general turned to Emily. "Miss Harper, while your methods today were unorthodox, you have exposed a serious breach of ethics within our training program. Your father was an exceptional pilot whose career was cut short by circumstances that now appear to warrant further investigation." Captain Thornton was immediately relieved of command. His demonstration was officially recorded as compromised by equipment irregularities, while Emily's flight was noted as an unauthorized but technically proficient display. The general directed a full review of all cadet evaluations from the past 5 years with Walsh appointed to the Oversight Committee, a redemption that would ensure fairness for future candidates. Most significantly, Michaels personally rescinded Emily's dismissal, reinstating her with a probationary period under Alvarez's supervision. From his breast pocket, The general withdrew a small velvet box. John Coleman Harper was posthumously exonerated last year. The evidence was compelling enough to warrant a formal apology and restoration of his service record. He opened the box, revealing a distinguished service medal. "This belongs to your family. I'd planned to mail it, but it seems fitting to present it in person." Emily accepted it with trembling hands, tears blurring her vision. "He never talked much about his military service," she said softly. "I think it hurt too much, knowing people believed he'd failed." General Michaels nodded. "These wings weren't clipped by failure. They were buried by silence. You made them fly again." 6 months later, Emily stood on the same tarmac where her journey had nearly ended. The morning sun painted the sky gold and pink as she watched F-22's taxi toward the runway. At her side stood Danny, his face creased in a proud smile. Emily touched the lieutenant's bars on her uniform, a commission earned after completing her probationary period with distinction. The investigation into Thornton's conduct had rippled through the entire Air Force training structure, uncovering systemic biases that had persisted for decades. Thornton himself had been dishonorably discharged. Under General Michaels' supervision, the Academy had implemented new transparent evaluation protocols designed to identify talent regardless of background. Later that afternoon, as Emily guided the Coleman through sky, executing intricate patterns with fluid precision, she felt her father's presence strongly. The silver wings gleamed on her chest as she showcased both the aircraft's capabilities and her own extraordinary talent. G-forces pressed her into the seat as she entered a tight turn, sweat beading on her brow despite the climate-controlled cockpit. Physical sensations anchored her in the moment. This was real, earned through struggle and vindication. Far below, officials watched with admiration, captured by the perfect harmony of pilot and machine. But Emily's thoughts were elsewhere. On golden wheat fields and a rickety old biplane, on her father's patient voice, "Feel the aircraft sparrow. Don't just fly it, become it." As she completed her demonstration and brought the Raptor into a graceful descent, Emily whispered, "This is for you, Dad." The Coleman responded as if it understood, as if the aircraft recognized the rightness of a Harper at its controls when her wheels touched down with characteristic perfection. Emily knew she had found her place in the world, not just as John Harper's daughter, but as a pilot whose skills had earned her the right to touch sky on her own terms. The journey had been filled with obstacles that might have broken a less determined spirit. But as her father had taught her, no one can clip your wings if you believe in your own strength. Emily Harper wasn't just fighting for her wings, she was rewriting history. And when the Pentagon's generals finally saw the truth, one question echoed: who else had Thornton grounded? You've just experienced another crazy moment with QA Stories. Subscribe now and dive into even more chaos, laughs, and jaw-dropping tales.